Welcome to this explainer. I want you to start by just closing your eyes for a second and really putting yourself in this scenario. Imagine waking up on a June morning. You're expecting warm sunshine, green fields, and that very first taste of a beautiful summer. But instead, you look out your window and you see a raging, relentless blizzard. I mean, it sounds like something straight out of a Hollywood disaster movie, right? But for millions of people across the globe in the early 19th century, this wasn't fiction. It was a terrifying reality.
Okay, let's dive into this. In June of 1816, the world was hit by a freak global winter that just completely shattered everyone's expectations of what summer was supposed to be. Over New England, an unbelievable 6 inches of snow fell right in the middle of June, and across the Atlantic in Europe, it was a very similar nightmare. Relentless, icy rain fell for days on end, literally turning local roads into rushing rivers. And if you looked up at the sky, you couldn't even see the bright sun. It just looked like this faint, sickly pink blur hidden behind a perpetually dark and gloomy sky.
Because absolutely no one understood what was happening. The world descended into absolute apocalyptic panic. People genuinely thought the end of days had arrived. You had these religious cults flaring up with terrifying intensity, predicting the end of the world. Riots were breaking out in the streets over rapidly dwindling food supplies, and the devastation wasn't just limited to the West either. In China, the monsoon season went completely haywire, resulting in massive, devastating floods and freezing temperatures that just wiped out enormous swaths of vital crops.
So this brings us to the ultimate question. Why? Why did the world suddenly freeze? The most incredible part of this entire event, and I really want to emphasize this, is that not a single scientist, ruler, or everyday citizen alive at the time had any idea what was causing this anomaly. They were entirely in the dark. The true culprit was actually a monster lurking thousands of miles away. It was a force of nature so colossal that human civilization didn't even see it coming.
Part 1. The Culprit. Mount Tambora, April 1815.
To find our culprit, we actually have to travel back exactly 1 year, to April 10, 1815, to a remote, massive volcano on the island of Sumbawa in modern-day Indonesia. Unimaginable pressure had been building up there for about 3,000 years, and when it finally cracked, Mount Tambora didn't just erupt. The mountain practically vaporized itself. The explosion was so violently loud that it's still classified as the loudest sound in recorded human history. Just to give you an idea of how insanely loud this was, British soldiers stationed in Sumatra, over 1,600 miles away, literally scrambled their troops because they thought the explosion was the sound of distant cannon fire from an invading naval armada. No joke.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer scale of the devastation. Tambora was roughly 100 times more powerful than the infamous 1980 eruption of Mount St. Helens. 100 times. It blasted an astonishing 36 cubic miles of rock, ash, and pumice directly into the sky. The eruption plunged the immediate surrounding area into total darkness for 3 consecutive days. The heavy ash caused the roofs of houses on neighboring islands to completely collapse. It triggered massive tsunamis, and tragically, over 10,000 people died instantly from the searing pyroclastic flows.
But here's the thing. The real threat to the globe, the actual mechanism that caused our worldwide winter, wasn't the ash. It was the estimated 60 million tons of sulfur dioxide that the volcano pumped directly into the upper atmosphere. This massive, imposing quantity of invisible gas was the true killer.
Part 2. The Weapon. The Aerosol Veil.
So, to understand how this highly localized disaster ended up freezing the entire globe, we have to look way up at the stratosphere. Let's break down this chemical process because it's fascinating. Step 1, the eruption blasts that massive cloud of sulfur dioxide, or SO2, high into the stratosphere. Step 2, once it gets up there, that gas reacts with the water vapor that's naturally present in our atmosphere. And step 3, this reaction forms highly reflective sulfate aerosols. If you want to visualize this, think of it like a giant global pair of mirrored sunglasses wrapping completely around the planet. High-altitude winds caught this veil and carried it all the way across the globe in a matter of months, successfully blocking out a massive portion of the sun's warmth.
So the crucial point is that this global pair of mirrored sunglasses caused worldwide temperatures to drop by about 1 to 2 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, I know, 1 or 2 degrees might not sound like a huge deal when you're just checking your morning weather app, right? But on a planetary scale, a sudden drop like that is entirely catastrophic. It completely and utterly disrupted our delicate global climate system. By the time spring of 1816 rolled around, these atmospheric effects hit the northern hemisphere like a runaway freight train.
Part 3. The Aftermath. Global Famine and Chaos. The immediate aftermath was totally defined by devastating agricultural impacts. In New England, farmers watched in absolute horror as severe frosts destroyed their crops month after month, from May all the way through August. Local ponds were literally freezing over in the middle of July. Because crops were failing globally, food prices skyrocketed, practically overnight, causing immediate economic panic. Just look at this. Before the freeze, American oats were 12 cents a bushel. Almost instantly, that price shot up to 92 cents a bushel. When staple food prices leap by nearly 800%, the poorest citizens simply cannot afford to eat.
And honestly, the situation was even worse across the ocean. We have to remember that Europe was already completely broken and exhausted from decades of the Napoleonic Wars. This weather anomaly caused the absolute worst famine of the entire 19th century. In Great Britain and France, mass desperation led to enormous food riots. Crowds were violently looting bakeries and grain stores just to survive. The sheer desperation probably reached its peak in Switzerland, where citizens were just completely out of options. Families were forced into the horrific position of scraping moss off of rocks and boiling wild weeds just to keep their children alive.
Part 4. The Silver Lining. Accidental Legacies. Now, history has a strange, almost conspiratorial way of turning absolute disaster into unexpected human creativity. In the summer of 1816, a group of young, eccentric British writers traveled to a luxury villa near Lake Geneva in Switzerland. This group included the famous poet Lord Byron, Percy Shelley, and an 18-year-old girl named Mary Wollstonecraft Godwin. They went expecting a beautiful, sunny alpine holiday. But instead, they got trapped indoors for days by relentless, freezing, apocalyptic storms. Feeling completely trapped by the weather and, frankly, incredibly bored, Lord Byron laid down a legendary challenge to the group. Who can write the best ghost story?
Sitting by that fireplace, listening to the unnatural howling wind outside, 18-year-old Mary was inspired by the dark, scientific anxieties of her time, particularly involving electricity. She penned a story about a scientist who brings a creature back to life. She literally created the modern horror genre right then and there by writing Frankenstein. And she wasn't the only one. During that exact same trip, Byron's personal physician, John Polidori, wrote The Vampire. He birthed the concept of the sophisticated, aristocratic vampire that directly paved the way for Bram Stoker's Dracula decades later. I mean, if this volcano hadn't erupted, we might never have gotten our modern Gothic horror genre. Crazy, right?
But literature wasn't the only field forever changed by this anomaly. Let's move to and see how this builds into an entirely different kind of butterfly effect. Because the global famine starved and killed off millions of livestock, including horses, and horses were the primary mode of human transportation, society was suddenly forced into a corner. We urgently needed a drastic innovation in how we physically moved around. A German inventor named Karl Dreis stepped up to solve this severe horse shortage. He invented a two-wheeled wooden contraption that you sat on and pushed with your feet. He called it the Laufmaschine, which translates to running machine. And yes, it is the direct ancestor to the modern bicycle, meaning, quite literally, a volcanic eruption in Indonesia accidentally gave human civilization the bicycle.
Part 5. A Fragile Civilization.
By 1817, the atmospheric ash and sulfur had finally settled back down to Earth. The sun broke through the clouds, temperatures warmed back up, and the global nightmare officially came to an end. And this brilliantly illustrates just how interconnected and vulnerable our world truly is. Within a matter of days, a single isolated event on an island in Indonesia triggered mass global migrations, completely reshaped worldwide economics, starved populations, and fundamentally altered human culture. And remember, all of this happened before humanity even knew what a tectonic plate was.
It really leaves us with a haunting final thought. Look at our world today. We're a society entirely reliant on incredibly delicate global supply chains, just-in-time logistics, and highly specific agricultural zones. So how would we handle it if the Earth decided to steal summer all over again? It's definitely something to think about the next time you stepped outside to enjoy the warm sunshine. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. If you enjoyed unpacking this incredible piece of history, keep exploring, stay curious, and I'll see you next time.